In the heart of a sprawling African city where the pavements carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories, where the scent of roasted maize and spiced groundnuts floated through the air, and where the chorus of honking taxis blended with the calls of women, balancing baskets of mangoes on their heads, there once walked a young woman named Abina, whose steps had always left more than footprints. They had left memories, whispers of resilience and love pressed into the very stones of the road she traveled each day, as though the pavement itself had learned to remember her. Abina had grown up in a small village where her laughter once echoed between mud brick huts and her feet had danced, barefoot on the red dust of her grandmother's compound, but life with all its twists and demands had carried her into the city where the roads were harder, the days longer, and the silences heavier. She came with dreams folded neatly in her heart, dreams of lifting her family from the weight of poverty, dreams of becoming more than the shadows of hardship they had endured after her father passed away when she was just a girl and her mother's weary hands could no longer provide all that was needed. Abina became a seamstress, her hands skillful at stitching torn fabrics and weaving patterns that carried the beauty of her culture. And every morning she walked the same stretch of pavement to the small shop where her needle and thread were her tools of survival. At first the road felt strange, crowded with strangers who brushed past without a glance, but with each passing day the pavement grew familiar until the cracks and corners seemed to know her steps, until the street vendors began to greet her with smiles, and the taxi drivers nodded in recognition. She walked that path through the seasons, in the heavy rains when the pavement glistened like glass in the burning heat, when the stones seemed to breathe fire beneath her sandals, in the cool evenings when the jacaranda blossoms painted the sidewalks purple. With every step Abina carried her story quietly, yet the pavement remembered. It remembered the day she received her first payment and skipped with joy all the way home, the day she carried food for her younger brother Kweku and hurried so he would not go to bed hungry, the day she wiped away tears after being told her work was not good enough, and the day she smiled again when a kind stranger praised her skill and encouraged her not to give up. But what the pavement remembered most were the evenings when her steps slowed, heavy with the silence of separation. For though she gave her life to her family and her craft, her heart ached with the absence of her childhood friend and first love. Kojo, who had once walked every road beside her in the village, but who now lived across the city, swallowed by the demands of his own survival. They had promised each other beneath the acacia tree of their youth that no matter where life carried them, they would remain close, that their laughter would never fade, but as the years passed, those promises became as distant as the stars above the city's restless nights. Abina often paused on the pavement at dusk, the golden light casting long shadows, whispering his name under her breath as though the very stones could carry her voice to him. She remembered the way he had once held her hand during the village festivals, the way his laughter had wrapped around her like a song, the way they had once believed that love alone could protect them from the harshness of the world. Yet now, each step she took was a silent goodbye to the life they had shared, a quiet acceptance that sometimes love is not enough when survival demands so much. Still, the pavement remembered, and in its cracks and dust lived the echoes of her hope that one day he would walk it again with her. One evening, after a long day of sewing, Abina walked home slowly, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, when an old woman selling roasted maize by the roadside stopped her. "Child," the woman said softly, her voice like the wind through dreary leaves, "you walk these streets with a heart too heavy. Do not let silence bury your love. Roads remember those who walk them with longing, and one day they carry our footsteps back to what we lost." Abina forced a smile, thanking her, but her chest tightened as tears threatened. That night, lying awake in her small room lit only by the faint glow of the moon through the window, she clutched the simple beaded bracelet Kojo had given her years ago. She whispered into the quiet, "Kojo, do you still think of me?" Outside, the pavement waited, silent but faithful, holding the memory of her steps as though it knew that her story was not yet complete. And so each day continued, her steps steady, her work unending, her silence deep. The city around her roared with life, but inside her heart there lived only the soft hope that the pavement, which remembered so much, might one day carry Kojo back to her. She did not know that across the city Kojo too sometimes stood in the twilight staring at the pavement beneath his feet, thinking of the girl whose laughter once gave him courage, longing for the path that would carry him back to her. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the street vendors packed away their baskets, Abina and Kojo continued to walk side by side, their steps finally moving in harmony after so many years of silence. And though the city roared around them with the clamor of horns, the laughter of children, and the calls of sellers closing their stalls, for them the world had narrowed into a soft, sacred space where only the echo of their shared footsteps mattered. Kojo told her how he had labored on construction sites, his back bent beneath the weight of stones heavier than the loneliness he carried, and how each night he would sit on the steps of unfinished buildings, staring at the city lights, imagining her walking those same streets somewhere, her laughter still as bright as the fireflies of their childhood village. Abina listened with tears pooling in her eyes, confessing how she had whispered his name into the pavement every evening, praying the road might carry her longing to him. How she had kept the bracelet close, believing that one day the beads would remind him of the promise they made under the acacia tree. They paused near her little shop, the faint smell of chalk and fabric still lingering in the air, and Kojo looked around at the place where she had poured her years of labor and love. "You built this with your own hands," he said softly, pride shining in his eyes. He took her hand gently, the calluses of his palms rough against her soft skin, and whispered, "Then let me help you stitch the rest of your life." At those words, Abina felt something deep within her settle, as though the pavement, which had remembered her every tear and every step, had finally delivered her back to the home she thought she had lost forever. Kojo began to meet her each evening after work, his strong hands carrying her basket as though it weighed nothing, his laughter once again weaving itself into her daily rhythm. Together they sat beneath the jacaranda tree where the children now gathered, and Abina, with her gentle voice, told them stories her grandmother once told her, tales of wise tortoises, brave hunters, and rivers that carried the voices of the ancestors. Kojo would listen quietly, sometimes adding his own memories, and the children would clap and giggle, their joy painting the air with a lightness that softened even the hardest hearts. The vendors, the taxi drivers, the neighbors, all noticed how Abina, once the quiet woman who walked with her head bowed, now lifted her chin high, her eyes shining like dawn after a long night. They noticed how Kojo, once a man of silence, now laughed easily, his hand always reaching for hers as though he feared to lose her again. And the pavement, faithful as ever, bore witness to it all, holding not just the memory of her lonely steps, but now the joyous rhythm of their reunion. One rainy evening, as the sky thundered and the pavement shimmered beneath a curtain of water, Kojo and Abina ran together, laughing like children, their clothes soaked, their hearts beating wildly. They took shelter under the jacaranda tree, its blossoms heavy with rain, and Kojo looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Abina," he whispered, "the world tried to pull us apart, but I believe this pavement remembered you for me. I don't ever want to walk another road without you. Then let's never let silence steal us again." At that moment, it did not matter that the city was loud, that the world beyond still demanded their labor and strength. What mattered was that they had found their way back to each other, that love, patient, quiet, enduring, had outlasted the years of silence. Months later, they decided to rebuild not only their bond but also a future together. With Kojo's skill as a mason and Abina's talent with her needle, they opened a small shop that sold both clothes and handmade crafts. It became a place where the community gathered, women brought their children to play under the jacaranda tree. Men stopped by after long days of work to share stories, and children ran in and out with laughter that filled the air like music. The shop stood on the same pavement that had carried Abina's lonely steps for years, but now it carried the sound of shared dreams. Kojo often said with a smile, "This road is no longer just stone. It's a witness, a keeper of our story." Time, as it always does, moved forward, and though life brought new challenges, sickness, struggles, and the endless demands of survival, they faced them together, their bond unbroken, their love stitched tightly into the fabric of their days. In the evenings, when the sun painted the city in shades of gold and the jacaranda blossoms drifted softly onto the pavement, they would sit, side by side, hands entwined, telling each other the same truth again and again, that no silence, no distance, no hardship had been strong enough to erase the memory of love. The pavement beneath their feet, warm from the day's sun, seemed almost to hum in agreement, carrying in its stones the story of two souls who had once walked apart but had chosen to walk together again. Moral: love and family bonds, no matter how deeply tested by silence, distance, or hardship, never truly disappear. The paths we walk hold the weight of our steps, and when walked with hope, they guide us back to the people and places that make us whole. The pavement may forget nothing, but it teaches us that true love will always find its way home.